You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Well, welcome back to another segment of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. And I have here in the studio with me Mr. Aaron Hicks.
Yes.
And Aaron is a tremendous young man. We're calling this segment Man Up because I met Aaron about 7 years ago in a support group that I created when in grad school. I went back to school when I was older, to offer support to men, particularly African-American men who are coming out of prison and want to help them to make a smooth transition back into society. The process is called Reentry. Yeah. But Man Up was a group where brothers could come and talk about their joys and their struggles of reentering the community. Mr. Hicks, Brother Aaron, welcome.
Thank you, man. It's a privilege to be on the show with you. It's a privilege to even talk about this specific thing because this is a very pivotal point in where you and I initially met.
Right. And listen, it's 7 years later. When I first met you, you said, hey, I just got out the joint. I got 7 years on paper still. And I was still learning all of that lingo and what that meant. And man, 7 years just transpired about 2.5 weeks ago. So on a Wednesday in late December, at noon, the clock was able to tick down and your probation ended. And in some ways, we'll talk later on about what the implications of, your ankle bracelet and things still are.
Absolutely.
But at that point, you were off paper. And that means off of extended supervision. How long has the state of Wisconsin been looking over your shoulders? How long have you been sort of under its supervision?
Absolutely. So my whole adult lifehood, I've been on probation and parole. I actually started this journey for me dealing with probation and parole started in 1989. I was 15. I was sentenced to 1 year, Ethan Allen School for Boys. And from that point on, I've never not been on probation or parole. And I just turned 44.
Man, that's something. So that's a long time to be on supervision. Now, people may not understand this. Supervision really means that you're still incarcerated. I think at some point I remember talking with the one of the previous secretaries of corrections, and I was referring to you. I was actually talking about your case as someone who was an ex-offender, and that was before I knew it was cool. You're supposed to say formerly incarcerated.
Absolutely.
And one of his executives stopped me and said, "Why do you keep referring to him as an ex-offender?" And I said, "Well, because he's not in prison. He's got a home. He's working for me. He's out in the community." And she said very clearly, she looked me right in my eyes, and she said, "As long as he's on paper, he is still an offender." I didn't know that. So they were offended that I was calling you an ex-offender. So even though you were on supervision for 7 years, you were still in prison.
That's correct. That's totally correct. And despite being back into the community, you're still very much connected to the Department of Correction. And for a wide variety of reasons, they can always send you back to prison. It doesn't have to be because there's a new crime or any of that. It could just be a simple violation, whether it be maybe drug use, could be something domestic, even an allegation. Those are the things that can bring you back into prison. And any time that you've been out on the street, that time will be taken away from you, and you will start that time back over in a more confined setting.
You drop such nuggets of wisdom, Aaron, as you're talking about your experience. And I have to just tell people who are listening to us, just hearing Aaron talk about his experiences has really helped me to understand the struggle of men and women better. It's humanized the formerly incarcerated, because I had my own perceptions of what people need when they come out of prison. You don't do the crime if you don't want to do the time. And but by getting to know men and women who are formerly incarcerated and the great things that they're doing in the community, it really drew my heart to want to be a part of voicing your struggle, not in your place, along with you. So I'll say this for folks who are listening to us: when we talk about stronger reentry programming, we're not saying that that people don't need to be incarcerated. There are certain crimes which people commit that really requires being away from society
Absolutely.
a little bit. I've heard you and others say that sitting down or being in prison may have helped at some point to save your life.
Absolutely.
So I want to make sure that people aren't thinking that we're saying folks who are doing violent crimes should go away to prison. In fact, I was looking at some statistics earlier today in preparation for this podcast that about half of the people who are in prison are in for non-violent crimes.
That's correct.
And so we totally get you rape someone, you use a deadly weapon. There are things that you're doing that you need to be away from society because you're a threat to society.
Yes.
But reentry, when I talked to you, when I met you, it's really about individuals who have paid their debt to society.
That's correct.
And they're trying to get their lives back, because if they don't, they go right back to the
That's correct.
to the joint. That's called recidivism.
That's right.
So when I'm talking to you about some of the struggles, it's not saying you should have never gone to prison, although on another show we'll get into, some of that. But it's saying once you paid your debt to society, if I'm correct, the state of Wisconsin no longer has a parole board. So that there's no, am I saying that correctly?
I'm still kind of uncertain with that, so I can't confirm that yay or nay. I believe there is actually still a parole board, but I'm not sure.
But you didn't come up before a parole board, so someone doesn't go before a committee to say you have how long was your sentence?
I was sentenced to 16 years running consecutive to 2.
So then no one brought you up at 7 years saying, okay, this guy's been really good. He's been working on his GED. He's been doing X, Y, and Z. We want to let him out earlier. So, my understanding is that process is not happening in Wisconsin.
That was the process that I went through because I'm actually under the old law. So I went through the whole process of seeing the parole board. I actually went to the parole board, I want to say at least 7 to 8 times.
7 to 8 times. So you did go before the parole board.
That's correct.
All right. But obviously it was denied each time.
That's right.
So when you were released, when you and I met 7 years ago, it's because you completed your full sentence.
No, actually I was given a grant based on my behavior. I was actually doing well. I was released from Oshkosh Correctional, and I had did a 12-year stay, but I could have easily did longer because I wasn't eligible for a mandatory release until maybe 2 years after I got out. So that I wound up getting a grant, and that helped me to get out earlier.
Really? So how much earlier did you get out?
5 years early.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
But by being on supervision, were you still carrying out some of that service?
That's
some
correct.
of that time on the outside?
That's correct.
So the 7 years you were given was basically serving those years.
Yeah.
Let me ask this question, because this is one of the things that's really sort of up in the air, and people are asking about this. Are there brothers or sisters, are there people in prison who would choose to just finish 5 more years in prison than to be on paper for 7 years outside of prison?
It's a yay and a nay. Some people are just ready to get out of there.
Okay.
So people will, take a early parole or a way out, maybe through boot camp or whatever the case may be, if they can get out. Some people just don't want to have no connections to the department at all. So those are the ones who will wind up doing all of this sentence, or at least most of it, and then be totally done with everything. So they don't have to worry about a PO or who I have to report to or supervision or rules and regulations. Right,
because sometimes, I remember you telling me I was able to be with Aaron when he had his last mandatory meeting with his agent. And I asked, why is this such a milestone after 7 years? And you helped me to understand because so much of the revocation and the recidivism happens for rule violation.
That's correct.
And not for a new crime.
That's right.
And you said that there were times that you just thought, I don't want to do this anymore.
That's correct.
The mandatory urine drops, or the ankle bracelet, which you're wearing, which you're told you're going to wear for the rest of your life. I mean, there have been times you were picked up just because there was a malfunction between the GPS and the ankle bracelet. So you had community and support and employment, but there were still times where the game playing was so crazy that you told me, you mentioned to your wife, Michelle, I just want to go back and finish my sentence because it's
correct.
easier in prison than out here. You really felt that some days?
Yeah, absolutely, because it was so difficult to be able to cope with being back out in the community. In one breath, they're saying, hey, we want you to get out. We want you to be reacclimated back into the community. We want you to get a job. We want you to start getting more involved. And I was doing those things, and then for a malfunction of my bracelet, I would wind up back in jail. And this happened a series of times. It didn't just happen once or twice. Easily over 25 to 30 times I wind up being locked up, which means, for example, if I'm locked up for a significant amount of time, how will I be able to pay my rent? What employer is going to continue to deal with, hey, I'm not showing up? All of those different things. One specific year, I had just made the dean's list. I had a 3.5 grade average at Madison College, and in that same breath, I wind up going to jail, and I almost would have missed being able to prepare for my exams. But with the help of yourself and Jerome and other people, that was what got me out, and I was able to continue to finish school.
And it wasn't because you were someplace you weren't supposed to be. It was a sheer malfunction.
That's correct.
Of the equipment. I remember that. I remember going to battle for you. In fact, this is how I know it was a malfunction. Your agent's boss's boss required her to drive back from Rock County.
That's correct.
To let you out of jail that night so that you would be able to go back to school. Otherwise, you would have missed very important classes by being locked up.
That's correct.
Over the weekend. Man, you're tuned into and you're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. I'm really honored to have my colleague and Aaron Hicks as my guest today. I met Aaron as a person coming out of prison who's been caught up in the system for years. He's now an employee with the Nehemiah Center for Urban Leadership Development. He's the assistant director of Reentry. He's helping to validate our work to the community, working with men and women who have been incarcerated, because he's doing this not because he's got a social work background, but because he's got an ankle bracelet. He's got, what's your number again? What's your department?
My number is 197122. That derives from 1989.
Wow. Now, I know we're going to do more segments after this because your story is so incredible. I'm going to need at least 3 or 4 podcasts to do it. Okay. But knowing how brilliant you are, Aaron, how talented you are, it breaks my heart that you can regurgitate that number so quickly because, on campus, I had to think about what my student ID number was.
Right.
Because although it identified me, it didn't identify me.
Yeah.
If I couldn't remember it, I could just say, my name is Alex G. Look me up. Here's my birth date. But, I mean, that's, I know from writing people in prison, that's how you get the money that comes into you on your books. That's how you get your mail.
That's right.
That becomes like
that's
a new
who you
identity.
are.
That's who you are.
That's right. That's how they define who you are based on that number. That number, every individual who deals with it has to memorize that number because they don't speak as Aaron Hicks. You don't speak as that. You speak as that number, and that's how they identify who you are, what you're able to do, what you're not able to do.
Wow. Aaron, I just want to say I have a few more questions for you, but I just appreciate your candor and your openness because part of what I'm wanting to do with my show is to help people to understand how African-American people process life. Now, it's not just black people in prison. I'm just checking my statistics again this morning. Black folks are about 6% of the state population and
That's
close
correct.
to 50% of the prison population.
That's correct.
State Journal had a statistic about 4 or 5 years ago that almost half of the men who are between 18 and 23, 24 in Dane County have some connection with the criminal justice system.
Correct.
50% of every black male between 18 and his early to mid 20s. And so I'm wanting people to hear the stories of people who are doing well. Because on the news, we see, if you had gotten in trouble, Aaron, we would have seen your face on the news. You would have been turned sideways with the mugshot. But you come in and, you're doing all of this good stuff and we don't have enough people talking about it. So part of what I want to do in these segments is help people to see the contribution you make to society. So here's my next question for you. So I just want to say thank you for helping people to understand the issue. What support did you receive while you were in prison? I mean, you were there for, you said 12, 13 years, where you were able to work. So I don't know how old you were. You mentioned to me when you went in, but did you get to complete your high school degree or did you a diploma? Did you have that?
Yeah.
But if there are any other kinds of things you're working on, and you don't need to be specific to say what you're working on, I guess what I want to know is, what did you get support for whatever it was that was ailing you, that led you down a life of crime that got you in prison, whether it's depression or untreated other mental health issues? Were there support programs, and do those programs still exist?
So one of the programs that stood out to me during my incarceration was restorative justice. It probably was one of the most powerful programs I ever went through, because it gave you a glimpse into the eyes of individuals who have been victimized by a wide variety of crimes.
Sure.
And so I got a chance to be able to see firsthand and hear firsthand, be able to touch and see individuals who had been victimized, whether it was anything from a property crime to a murder. So I started to get a chance to see that, and I think it just made stuff much more real to me, because everything had always been afar off. You never get a chance to talk to people who have been victimized by crime. So I think that was an eye opener for me. In terms of programming all around, there were some programs throughout the institution that I did get involved in, but I think what really was my support was really, I knew I needed to make a change. I needed to do something different. During that journey, I had lost my mom, and I knew my mom really wanted me to do something with my life. She always used to tell me, you're not no dummy. You just choose to hang around people that ain't doing nothing with their lives. And she was right. But I didn't understand, what did I want to do? I didn't know where I wanted to go. And a lot of times people that's come from the life that I come from, we don't always believe that, like just being on this radio show, we don't believe that these things are possible, that this is doable. We haven't been exposed to a lot of things. So therefore, what I've saw throughout a lot of my life, drug dealing, drug selling, pimping, prostitution, all of these things. And so that was my norm. And so for a long time, that was the norm that I had, and that's kind of how I responded, hearing, gunshots, gun violence. I mean, that's so common. That's a norm to me. It wasn't until I stepped outside of that to see, hold on, that's not even normal. But when you're in it, you don't think like that. It is.
It's just a way of life.
That's right.
Let me ask you a question. You said your mom passed away when you were in prison. We watch television and movies, and so we have these images of someone coming in an orange jumpsuit with two deputies behind them, chained up to say goodbye to their parents. That's fictional. You didn't get to have closure. You didn't get to come to your mother's memorial service.
No, I didn't get a chance to even talk to my mom. I never even talked to her again. When I left, when I got incarcerated, in 1998, November. And then my mom passed away the following year, 99. She was in the hospital, and she was on a respirator. And so I didn't get a chance to be able to speak with her or have a conversation or even have a picture of her. Even to this day, I've never even seen my mom's obituary. I have saw where she lays at. But outside of that, I don't have any pictures of my mom or anything of those type of things. And those are the things that happens to individuals when you are incarcerated. Not only is your freedom taken away, but your connection to your family and loved ones, that's also being stripped as well.
Wow. And I'm really sorry about that loss. I mean, although I've known you for years, we've never really talked about that.
That's
so
correct.
I appreciate you sharing that. And so you say you're ripped away from those connections, because it's really those relationships that make you believe you have support.
That's right.
When you get out. So you and Michelle have been married for?
We've been married since 2000. Since 2000.
So you were able to get married while you were incarcerated.
That's correct.
And so I know she's been a tremendous support. At some point I told Michelle, she's shy, so she doesn't want to talk, but she's been a tremendous support for you. I love Michelle for that.
Yeah.
So at some point I want to have you both on.
Yeah.
But what a tremendous woman to be with you for those years. You had a daughter. Your daughter was born while.
Yeah.
Was Aaron born before you went away?
Yeah, so she was born, my daughter was born October 27, 1998, and I was incarcerated November of 1998.
So she's just a few months, almost a month.
She was 3 weeks old when I went in.
So Aaron, so just knowing this, when we did the countdown, for you to get off paper and to have both Aaron and Michelle, that, man, I had to fight back the tears because your daughter's a grown woman. She's talented. She can sing. She's beautiful. Yeah. And even though the department struggled, they didn't want to let you be in her life. I mean, for the past 7 years, you've had to live someplace
outside
else because they didn't want you to be in your home with your daughter.
That's right.
When we talk about how young black girls need their fathers.
That's correct.
And you weren't allowed to live in the same place. And your crime and things had nothing to do with children, had nothing to do with your daughter, had nothing to do with your family. Right. You were kept from living with your daughter, but yet Michelle kept her in your life. You kept them in your life. And so when that happened on that day, man, they were in the facility with us. Right. I got a picture of you all.
That's right. And that was huge. I mean, I don't really think no one has really even understood what was just captured, what just happened, and what type of milestone actually was accomplished. For most people that's on probation and parole, the likelihood of them successfully completing it is almost slim to none. Our recidivism
because the rule violation that just gets you more and more time.
That's right, because our recidivism rate is off the charts. Our prison system is fueled by crimeless revocation. That's the very thing that keeps our system afloat. And it ain't until we start to address those issues and start to focus in on why are we allowing individuals to go into prison who have not committed a crime
without new crime. Give me an example of like some foolish rule violation that was on your part of your own rules. I read them because you gave me a copy of them. Like, was I right about the one at the mall? Like that store? Is that
right? Like one of the rules I had was I couldn't even go down State Street. If I went down State Street, that was a violation of my rule. Mind you, I'm catching the city bus. And so because I'm catching the city bus, most, not all, but most of the bus drive down State Street. So
you had to get off the bus?
I either have to get off the bus or I'm serious. Either have to get off the bus or I have to find another route to be able to get to where I'm going so that I didn't go down State Street.
And aren't there some rules? I don't know if this is in yours, but let's just say if someone has some type of just depending on their background, like they couldn't watch a Victoria's Secret commercial on television. So like they would have to leave the room.
Right. That's correct. I mean, these are the type of rules. I think what winds up happening is there's no balances and no checks. Some of this stuff gets really they get silly with it. I remember one of the rules that was created for me was I could not speak to media via on radio, in person or over the phone.
So like what you're doing right now, you couldn't do while you're on paper.
It would be a violation of my rules.
That's a violation of your constitutional right.
That's correct. But I was told I couldn't do it. And the number one rule that anybody who's on probation parole
what is that?
You will do whatever the agent tells you to do. Like that's the number one rule. So
man. And so folks who are listening, you might think, well, come on, who's going to know what Aaron watches during the Super Bowl? Well, when you go in for your questions, you'll be asked, well, have you done this? Have you violated this? Have you violated that? But the final question is, have you violated any of these rules that I have not asked you about?
That's right. That's
the part that still blows me away. They sit there, make you go through a polygraph exam test that you got to pay for. How much is it for a good polygraph?
$350.
That you pay out of your own pocket.
That's correct.
And then the last question is, have you violated anything of these 13 pages of rules that I did not ask you about? That's how they catch you on whether or not you watched a Victoria's Secret commercial. Right. You're a married man and can't walk into Victoria's Secret with your wife on Valentine's Day, before Valentine's Day. You can't be on State Street.
That's right. Or on Halloween, you can't even be out in the community, period. You have to go to your house.
Wow. I've got one more question for you. And again, ladies and gentlemen, my guest today here on Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G is Aaron Hicks. I hope he knows that I'm serious when I tell him that he's one of my heroes. Not because you go to prison, but because of how you get your life together. I've seen people throw their lives away because they've had a bad day, or a bad relationship, and you've spent most of your adult life.
That's correct.
Connected in the system, and you still have belief in the future. So I want to talk to you about your faith and the role of that, the next time I have you on. Yeah. But you've never been able to vote because, I don't know if people realize this, but in Wisconsin, even though you were out of prison for 7 years, if you are on paper,
that's correct,
you cannot vote in Wisconsin, correct?
That's correct.
Now, some people in some states, if you have been a felon, can never, ever vote again.
That's correct.
That's not the case in Wisconsin, correct?
That's correct.
So you've never voted before.
I've never voted. And so when this election does come, it'll be my first time, but it'll be a blessing to do it. So I will be voting.
Wow. Now, what people don't understand, we'll pick this up later too, Aaron, is incarcerated men and women are included in Wisconsin census.
That's correct.
So that means that's our ability to get more money from the federal government because it's based on state population.
That's correct.
So you have all these black men and their bodies that are counted.
That's correct.
In the census, so that it gets more money to Wisconsin.
For that county.
But you can't vote on how that money is distributed.
That's correct. That's correct. That's correct.
So one of the things came out of our criminal justice meeting. Aaron helps me to chair a Justified Anger Criminal Justice work group, and we've got the state public defender on it. We've got the sheriff on it. We've got the district attorney on it. We've got someone from DOC, from the police department.
That's correct.
From a number of organizations. It's really a former federal prosecutor.
That's correct.
And one of the things that we talked about at our last meeting is that for every man or woman who's on paper and cannot vote, they need to make sure that 5 of their friends get out and vote.
That's correct.
As well. So they don't have a ballot, but they've got a voice. And so we're going to be doing a push on that, Aaron, around election time to really get people to get out and vote, because some of these things can be changed if the families and the loved ones of people who have been incarcerated can't vote. They can get other people to do it.
That's correct.
And what Aaron just said about not being able to vote really gets at the heart of what Michelle Alexander was addressing in her book, The New Jim Crow, that once individuals have gone through this process, they lose housing, they lose
That's correct.
so many things, but they lose their voice. And again, in some states, never to be regained again. So it makes you wonder about the system that allows people to fall into such traps, particularly as young men. We're seeing younger and younger and younger men in prison. I said that was my last question. Let me ask you one more. There's this thought that minors are not in holding in like our jails with grown men. When you've been in jail for holding, have you seen minors in jail with you?
Absolutely. I just want to share that a lot of times we have these misconceptions as if our young people are not being held at the Dane County Jail, but they are. Not just
you say young people. You're talking minors.
I'm talking about everything from 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds. If for whatever reason they have allowed these young people to get in there. And I don't know how they justify it. I don't know if these young people have been waived. Some of the crimes have not been severe at all, nevertheless.
Right, because we know 17-year-olds are waived.
Right.
But someone 15 or 16 is not. I mean, if they've committed murder, I understand them being in holding, although that's still not supposed to be until they're tried or sentenced.
Yeah.
But in just holding, 16-year-old kids are being held up with grown people.
Yeah.
That's just...
It is, and it's sad because what winds up happening is, one, they're not equipped or prepared for any of that. They're easily taken advantage of, sent off to do whatever. And so because of those reasons, and a lot of times it's kind of almost brushed under the rug, for whatever reason, young people make it in there. And, it was a matter of fact, when I was in there, it was a guy that was in class with my daughter. So, I mean, and they were the same age. And, and this was a few years ago, but it just, it blew me away that he would even ever be able to be in there. And he knew who my daughter was. So,
wow. Again, you're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. My guest has been Mr. Aaron Hicks. As you can tell, he has a powerful story. He's an advocate. He's a case manager. He's a leader. At one point, his agent wouldn't let him attend our Man Up groups because they asked me who I thought I was, putting it into your head that you could be a leader, and now you're sitting here on a national podcast, talking about your experiences. Any parting thoughts you want to say? And again, I'm going to have you back to talk more about things. By the time this airs, some of the big stuff that you're working on this week will have happened.
Yeah.
But if you just want to talk about what you're going to be speaking to this week, what you're working on, and then next time you come back, I want to talk about some of the work you're doing with Nehemiah, and then I also want to have Michelle in with you. So just anything you want to say.
I just want to share with the people that this coming week, actually today at noon, I'll be on a panel discussing crimeless revocation.
Some of what we're talking about today.
That's right, and doing a call to action, because it's time for people to get involved. It's time to be educated, to know what's going on in your communities, and how can you support these individuals. We know that 90 to 95% of people who get incarcerated will come back into the community. And we
say that statistic again.
It's 90 to 95% of people who go to prison will come back to the community. And in understanding that, it's our obligation to help these individuals so that they can be able to navigate, so that they can be safe, and so that they can be able to navigate through this community and do it constructively. You know, people are looking for living wage jobs. They're looking for places to stay. And we have to create avenues for these individuals so that whatever the crime was, whatever the reason why they went to prison, that doesn't happen again. And it's not just, we can't limit it just to the Department of Correction thinking, oh, well, if this individual takes this program or that program, it's deeper than that. We have to walk with these individuals. We have to hear the heartbeat of these individuals, and we have to spend time with these individuals. And these individuals can actually become assets to the community. They can be eye openers, and they can be effective, because what winds up happening is, we are the expert. We are the people who live this. And because we live it, we understand what needs to happen for us to be successful in this community. And so that we don't always just hear a story about how a person failed, but we also can be able to see this person was successful, and this is how he did it. This is how he did it. And this is the blueprint. And we create a blueprint for these individuals so that they can be out in the community. God forbid that it comes in front of somebody's front door and now they're faced with, somebody trying to take something from them or hurt them in any way, shape, or form. That's not the objective. The objective is to help these individuals get out, be constructive, live prosperous, however that looks, and make sure that these people are involved. Because if we don't do this, if we ostracize these individuals, they're going to do something anyway. So it makes more sense that we are conscious of what they're doing and how they're going about doing it, and how can it be effective to our community to keep us safe.
And Mr. Hicks, you are a great reminder to me and to those who are listening that there are men and women who are getting their lives together, holding to their families, and becoming very positive role models and contributors to society. I'm glad that you're back in society. I'm glad that you're off paper. We need to get a movement going to get you off that ankle bracelet. We'll be talking about that in another show. But I'm really honored to have you here today. Thank you for being here.
Man, it was a blessing.
In the studio with me, and I do want to have you back soon. You've been listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G, and my guest has been Mr. Aaron Hicks. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
And we appreciate your support.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can find out more about Dr. Alex G's amazing work at www.alexg.com. Black Like Me is sponsored by the generosity of the Human Family Unity Foundation.